Mam Soma Yoon blew the bubble slowly, deliberately, watching it expand until it nearly kissed his face before it popped. He didn't flinch. Kang Jiwoo sat across from her like a man who had never been disrespected in his life and wasn't sure whether to be offended or entertained. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass. His suit was flawless in the way that only obscene amounts of money could achieve. And his eyes, dark, still, unreadable, were fixed on her like she was a puzzle he hadn't decided whether to solve or discard. She reached into her bag for another stick of gum. This is what being sold feels like, she thought. At least the restaurant is nice. Her name was Mama Soma Yoon, last born, unwanted, willed almost everything. And tonight, on Valentine's Day of all days, she had been dressed up and delivered to a Korean mafia boss like a peace offering wrapped in a bodycon dress. She wasn't even going to pretend to be interested. "You're not what I expected," Jiwoo said, finally. His voice was low, controlled, the kind of voice that gave orders and never repeated them. She blew another bubble. "Neither are you," she said when it popped. "I expected someone uglier." The corner of his mouth moved, just barely. He almost smiled, she noted. Interesting. If Mam Soma just made you laugh, wait until you see what she does next. Stay with this story because it is about to get completely out of hand. And if you are new here, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because this is the kind of story you do not want to miss in the middle. Now let us get into it. To understand Mam Soma Yoon, you had to understand the night she was born. Kim Tae-yeon had been pacing the hospital corridor for 6 hours straight when the doctor finally walked out with that particular expression on his face. The one that meant the news was complicated. Elizabeth Yoon had been so certain. 3 scans, 3 different doctors, all of them pointing at the same grainy image and saying the same word. Boy, she had already picked the name, already imagined the heir, already told every single person at every single dinner party that this time, finally, she was getting her son. And then Mam Soma arrived, loud, furious, and absolutely not a boy. Kim Tae-yeon had laughed so hard the nurses asked him to keep it down. He walked into that delivery room, looked at his 3rd daughter, screaming her lungs out like she was already arguing with someone, and fell completely in love. Elizabeth did not laugh. She looked at that baby, and something behind her eyes went very quiet. Very still. The kind of still that does not thaw easily. She had given this family everything. 2 daughters already, and now a 3rd. The scan had promised her a son and delivered a lie wrapped in a pink blanket instead. She named her Mam Soma because Kim Tae-yeon insisted on something that honored her African roots. Elizabeth agreed only because she was too tired to fight about it. But from that night forward, something between Elizabeth and her last-born daughter was already broken before it even had the chance to begin. Mam Soma grew up feeling that coldness the way you feel a draft from under a door. You cannot see it, you cannot hold it, but it finds you anyway, especially in winter, especially at night, especially when you are 7 years old and you have just scored the highest in your class and you bring your report card home and your mother looks at it and says nothing, absolutely nothing, just folds it and puts it on the counter and goes back to stirring her pot. Her father was different. Kim Tae-yeon saw his last-born daughter with a clarity that felt almost unfair to her sisters. He saw the sharpness in her, the way she processed a room before she entered it, the way she remembered everything, filed everything, used everything. He saw a mind that did not waste itself and a spirit that refused to be small, no matter how many times life tried to press it down. He willed her the business, not all of it. Her sisters received their portions, but the controlling share, the deciding vote, the real weight of the Yoon family's luxury hospitality empire, hotels, exclusive event venues, high-end experiences across 3 continents. He left it to Mam Soma, because he knew, he had always known. Elizabeth never forgave him for it, and so Mam Soma grew up in a house where her father's love was the only warm room and her mother's silence was the longest corridor. She learned to be loud because quiet felt too much like disappearing. She learned to be unbothered because caring too much only gave people ammunition. She learned to chew gum at dinner tables and blow bubbles in uncomfortable situations because it was either that or cry, and Mam Soma Yoon did not cry in front of people. She had not cried in front of anyone since she was 9 years old. Her 2 older sisters, Nara and Soyeon, had both married well and moved out, leaving Mama Soma alone in that big house with Elizabeth's expectations and her father's absence after his health began to decline. And it was during one of those quiet, suffocating evenings that Elizabeth had looked across the dinner table at her last-born daughter and decided that the best solution to the problem of Mamsoma was to make her someone else's problem. The Kang family had reached out first. An alliance, a merger really, dressed up in the language of marriage. The Kang name carried weight in Korea that went beyond business. Kang Ji-woo was 32 years old, obscenely wealthy, and the kind of powerful that governments acknowledged quietly and never spoke about publicly. He ran his empire with the precision of someone who had never once been surprised by anything. He had also sworn off relationships entirely. The last woman he had loved had gotten pregnant for his closest friend. He had found out the way you find out things that destroy you, suddenly, completely, with no warning and no soft landing. What made it worse, what made it the kind of wound that does not close properly, was that he had accepted the child anyway, had been willing to raise that baby as his own because he loved her that much, and she had still left, packed her things, taken the baby, and walked out of his life like he had never mattered at all. Kang Ji-woo had decided after that, quietly and completely, that he was done. So when his family brought the alliance to him, he had refused, twice. It was only after considerable pressure and the understanding that this merger meant something significant for the empire he had built that he agreed to one meeting, one dinner, Valentine's Day. He would sit across from whoever this girl was, be polite, and then explain clearly that marriage was not something he was available for. That was the plan. The plan did not account for Mam Soma-yoon and her gum. She had shown up to that restaurant the way someone shows up to a dentist appointment, resigned, mildly irritated, dressed beautifully in a way that suggested someone else had picked the outfit because she herself could not be bothered. Her hair was done, her makeup was flawless, and she was chewing gum with the full enthusiasm of someone who had decided before she even walked through the door that she was not going to perform for anybody tonight. Ji-woo had watched her cross the restaurant toward his table and felt something shift very slightly in his chest. He ignored it. He was good at ignoring things. But then she sat down and blew that bubble directly into the atmosphere between them, and something about the absolute audacity of it caught him completely off guard. Nobody did that. Nobody sat across from Kang Ji-woo and blew bubbles in his face. His own men did not look him directly in the eye without permission. And this woman, this last-born daughter of the Yoon family, who had been sent here against her will and had clearly decided to make that everyone's problem, was on her second stick of gum before he had even introduced himself properly. He found himself paying attention in a way he had not paid attention to anything in a very long time. "You're not what I expected," he said. She blew another bubble. "Neither are you," she said when it popped. "I expected someone uglier." He almost smiled. He caught it just in time, but it was close. Closer than anything had come in years. They ordered food eventually. Or rather, Ji-woo ordered, and Mama Soma looked at the menu with the energy of someone doing a favor and pointed at something random. She ate, though. He noticed that. Underneath all the performance of not caring, she was actually hungry, and she ate without pretending otherwise, and there was something oddly refreshing about that. She did not ask him about his work, did not try to impress him, did not laugh too loudly at things that were not funny, or lean forward in that particular way. Women leaned forward when they wanted to be noticed. She sat in her chair like she owned it and spoke when she felt like speaking and looked out of the window when she did not. "You hate being here," he said at some point. "I hate that I was sent here," she corrected without looking at him. "There is a difference." He considered that. What is the difference? She finally looked at him. Full eye contact, steady and unbothered. "One means I have a problem with you. The other means I have a problem with my mother. You just happen to be sitting in the middle of it." He was quiet for a moment. "That is surprisingly honest." "I am always honest," she said. "It is the most efficient way to live." Something about the way she said it made him think she had learned that the hard way. The evening stretched longer than either of them had planned. The restaurant began to empty around them, and neither of them moved to leave. At some point, the conversation had shifted from the careful, polite territory of strangers into something that felt almost like argument and almost like sport. She pushed back on everything he said, not aggressively, not rudely, but with the kind of calm certainty that made it clear she had thought about most things already and was not particularly interested in being corrected. He challenged her on something. She challenged him back harder. "You think you know everything," he said. "I think I know enough," she replied, which is more than most people can say. "Prove it." She raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me." You keep saying you know things, Jiwoo said, and there was something different in his voice now, something that was not quite a challenge and not quite an invitation, but lived dangerously in the space between both. Prove it. Mamasoma looked at him for a long moment, then she tilted her head slightly. That sounds like something you would have to show me at your house. The words came out before she fully examined them. She saw it register on his face and felt the shift in the air between them. She should have taken it back. She absolutely should have taken it back. She did not take it back. Now, before we go any further, if this story already has you and you know somebody who would lose their mind over Mamsoma Yoon, share this right now. Send it to that one friend who loves a good romance with a woman who does not apologize for existing. They will thank you later. Now back to the story. Jiwoo's house was not a house. It was the kind of building that made you understand immediately and without any room for confusion exactly who lived there and what kind of world they operated in. It sat behind gates that did not look like gates because they did not need to look like gates. Everything about it was quiet and enormous and absolutely certain of itself. Mamsoma walked in and looked around with her hands in her little clutch bag and said nothing for a full 10 seconds. "It is bigger than I expected," she said finally. "Everything about tonight has been different, from what I expected," Jiwoo replied. She looked at him sideways. He looked back at her with those dark, unreadable eyes and the corner of his mouth doing that almost smile thing again. She should have gone home. She absolutely should have gone home. She did not go home. The next morning arrived with the particular cruelty that mornings reserve for situations you cannot explain to yourself. Mamsoma Yoon opened her eyes and stared at a ceiling that was not her ceiling. The sheets were too good. The pillow was too soft. The room smelled like something expensive and distinctly male and completely unfamiliar. She lay completely still for a full 30 seconds. The ceiling said nothing. She turned her head slowly. He was asleep, or at least his eyes were closed. His chest rose and fell with the peaceful arrogance of a man who had never once experienced consequences in his life. His face in sleep was different, younger somehow, less guarded, still annoyingly perfect. Okay, she told herself with great composure. Okay, we are calm, we are collected, we are leaving. She peeled back the covers 1 centimeter at a time like she was diffusing something, sat up with the careful precision of a woman trying not to disturb the air itself, found one heel under the bed, found the other one behind a lamp. She did not want to know how it got there. She found her dress draped over a chair and put it on with the focused efficiency of someone completing a military operation, smoothed her hair with her hands, picked up her clutch, took 1 breath, 3 steps to the door, 3 steps to freedom, 3 steps to pretending this entire night was a fever dream she would take to her absolute grave. She took the first step, the second, the third. Going somewhere? His voice was so calm, so completely unbothered, like he had been awake the entire time, lying there with his eyes closed, waiting for precisely this moment to detonate it. Mamasoma stopped walking. She closed her eyes. God, she prayed with tremendous sincerity, if you have ever loved me, even a little bit, even once, now would be the time to show it. God, as usual, did not respond. She turned around slowly. Kang Ji-woo was sitting up in bed, arms folded, watching her with an expression that could only be described as deeply entertained. He had clearly been awake for some time, possibly the whole time. The thought alone made her want to walk directly through the wall. "I was just," she started. "Leaving," he said. "Yes, I noticed. I have somewhere to be. It is 6:47 in the morning. I am a morning person." He looked at her standing there in last night's dress with one heel slightly higher than the other because she had put them on in a hurry, and he said absolutely nothing for a moment. Just looked at her. Then he said, "Sit down, Mamsoma." "I would rather sit down." She sat down, not because she was told to, purely because her legs made that decision independently, and she was not going to examine that too closely right now. He ordered breakfast. She did not ask him to, but it arrived anyway, brought in by someone who did not look at either of them and disappeared immediately. The food was good. She ate it because she was hungry, and Mamsoma Yoon had never once pretended not to be hungry when she was hungry. They did not talk about what had happened. He did not make it strange, and she did not make it apologetic, and somehow that made it stranger and more comfortable at the same time. He asked her about her family business. She answered without meaning to. He listened the way people listen when they are actually listening and not just waiting for their turn to speak. When she finally left 2 hours later, it was through the front door and not the window, which she considered a personal victory. She sat in the back of the car she called for herself, looked out at Sol passing by outside, and said out loud to no one in particular, that did not happen. It had absolutely happened. Her phone rang before she even got home. She knew who it was before she looked. Mimi had a particular gift for calling at exactly the moment you least wanted to talk and most needed to. "Where are you?" Mimi's voice came through the phone at a volume that suggested she had been worried and was now transitioning rapidly into furious. "Good morning to you too, Miss Soma." The way Mimi said her name contained an entire paragraph. "Your mother has called me 4 times. 4. Your sister Nara called me twice. It is 9:30 in the morning and you did not come home last night, and the last thing you told me was that you were going on a date you did not want to go on with a man your mother picked for you. So I am going to ask you one more time. Where are you?" Mem Soma watched Sol go by outside the window. "On my way home," she said. A pause. Then, with the deadly calm of someone assembling the full picture, Mimi said, "Mem Soma Yoon, did you spend the night?" "I would rather not." "You spent the night." The driver glanced in the rearview mirror. Mama Soma held the phone slightly away from her ear. "Mimi, on a first date that your mother arranged with a mafia boss." Another pause, then completely deadpan. "Was he good?" Mama Soma closed her eyes. "I am not answering that." "That is an answer." "Mimi, on a scale of 1 to 10, I am ending this call." "Mama Soma, if you end this call, I will come to your house and ask you in front of your mother." 100, Mama Soma said. Complete silence on the other end. Then, very quietly, Mimi said, "Out of 10? Are we done? I need you to come over right now. Bring food. I have questions. So many questions. Bring the expensive snacks. This is not a cheap conversation." Mem Soma almost smiled. She caught it just in time. "I will see you at noon," she said and hung up. She leaned her head against the cold window of the car and watched the city and thought about dark, still eyes and a jaw sharp enough to cut glass and a voice that said going somewhere like it had all the time in the world. She thought about how she had not faked a single thing last night, had not performed or pretended or bent herself into a shape that would make someone else comfortable, had just been exactly herself, gum and all, and he had not looked away. Nobody ever looked at her the way he had looked at her last night. She did not know what to do with that information, so she filed it under things to examine later and looked out of the window until the car pulled up to her mother's house. Elizabeth was standing in the living room when she walked in, arms folded, dressed already, face arranged into the particular expression she reserved for Madame Soma specifically, the one that sat somewhere between disappointment and confirmation of everything she already believed. "It is almost 10 in the morning, Elizabeth said. "Good morning, Mother." "Where were you?" Ma'am Soma set her clutch down on the side table. The date ran long. Elizabeth's eyes moved over her. The dress from last night. The heels she was carrying in her hand because her feet had made their feelings known on that topic. She said nothing for a moment that lasted considerably longer than a moment. "Is it not you again?" Elizabeth said finally. Not a question, just a statement dropped into the room like a stone into water. The same 5 words she had been saying over Ma'am Soma her entire life. "Is it not you again?" As though Ma'am Soma's existence was a recurring inconvenience rather than a person. Ma'am Soma looked at her mother, looked at the woman who had been given a daughter and spent 23 years grieving the son she never got instead, and she felt something in her chest that she was used to feeling. That particular ache that had lived behind her sternum since she was old enough to understand what it meant when your mother looked through you, instead of at you. She picked up her clutch. "I am going to change," she said quietly and walked upstairs without another word. She met Mimi at noon with the expensive snacks. Mimi was already on the couch with her legs folded under her when Ma'am Soma walked in, and she had the expression of someone who had been preparing questions since 9:30 in the morning, which she absolutely had. "Start from the beginning," Mimi said, reaching for a snack before Ma'am Soma had even sat down. "Leave nothing out. I mean nothing." Mama Soma sat down and looked at her best friend and said, "He was awake the whole time." Mimi froze mid-chew. "What?" "When I was tiptoeing out, he was awake the whole time." Mimi put the snack down. "He watched you tiptoe." "Find my shoes, put on my dress, walk to the door." and said nothing until I was 3 steps away. Mimi stared at her. What did he say? Going somewhere. The shriek Mimi produced at this information was significant, enough that her neighbor knocked on the wall. He said going somewhere? Mimi was on her feet now for reasons that were unclear. Like a whole dramatic K-drama line, just like that, going somewhere? Mimi. That man was performing, he planned that. He laid there and let you find your shoes and put on your dress and walked to the door and waited for the most cinematic possible moment. Mimi pressed both hands to her face. Mama Soma, he likes you. He does not. A man who does not care lets you leave. A man who does not care pretends to still be asleep so everybody can move on with their lives with their dignity intact. He did not do that, but he watched you tiptoe around, find your shoes, get dressed, and then waited until you were 3 steps from freedom to stop you. He waited for the moment of maximum drama and delivered one line. Mimi sat back down with great purpose. He absolutely likes you. Mama Soma opened a snack and said nothing. And the 100? Mimi said, deadly calm now. Out of 10. We are not. Was that the whole night or? Mimi. I am just asking for context. The whole night, Mam Soma said. Are you happy now? Mimi looked at her best friend for a long, quiet moment. No, she said softly, because you are already doing it. Mam Soma looked up. Do what? You are already pulling back, Mimi said. Already filing it away somewhere you do not have to look at it. Already deciding it was nothing before you have even given yourself permission to decide what it actually was. She reached over and took Mam Soma's hand. You are allowed to feel things, you know. It is not a character flaw. Mama Soma looked at their hands. He is a mafia boss, she said. And you are the girl your own mother tried to give away on Valentine's Day. Mimi said simply. You have survived worse starting points. Mam Soma said nothing for a moment. Then she picked up her snack and leaned back against the couch and stared at the ceiling. I need to do something, she said. About Jiwoo? About the business. She said it quietly, like a decision made. Dad willed it to me for a reason. I have been sitting on it because it felt like taking something that was not fully mine yet. But it is mine. He made sure it was mine. She paused. I am going to run it properly. Mimi looked at her. Not to prove anything to your mother? No, Mama Soma said. Then, maybe a little, but mostly for me, because I am tired of being the family villain who does nothing. If they are going to call me the villain, I might as well build something worth vilifying. Mimi smiled slowly. There she is. Now pause here for just a moment because things are about to accelerate in a way Mama Soma is completely unprepared for. If you are watching this and you have not subscribed yet, do that right now, because Kang Ji-woo is about to remind everyone in this story that he did not build an empire by letting things go. Subscribe, hit the bell and come right back. He called 3 days later. She did not answer. He called again the next day. She looked at the screen, watched his name sit there with the quiet confidence of someone who had never once been ignored, and declined it. The day after that, flowers arrived. Not a small bunch, not a polite arrangement. An entire display that took 2 people to carry and occupied a significant portion of the Yoon family entrance hall. Elizabeth stood in the doorway of the sitting room and stared at them with an expression Mam Soma had never seen on her mother's face before. It looked almost like reassessment. Mama Soma looked at the flowers and felt something complicated move through her chest. She left them where they were and went upstairs and called her father's business manager to schedule her first official meeting as the acting head of the Yoon hospitality empire. If Kang Ji-woo thought flowers were going to make her forget that she had an entire life to build, he did not know her at all. He sent a car the following week. She sent it back. He showed up at a business lunch she was attending. She looked up from her notes and found him standing at the entrance of the restaurant, being greeted by the owner with the particular reverence that places reserve for people who could buy them without checking their balance first. He had not called ahead, had not announced himself, had simply arrived and found her table with those dark eyes like he had a map she had not given him. He sat down across from her. She looked at him. I have a meeting, she said. I know, he said. I moved it. She stared at him. You moved my meeting. By 1 hour, you will still make it. He picked up the menu with the calm of a man who saw absolutely no issue with anything he had just said. I wanted to have lunch. Mam Soma put down her pen very carefully. Kang Ji-woo, she said, you cannot move my meetings. I did not cancel it, he said reasonably. Moved it. There is a difference. She recognized those words coming back at her, and the absolute nerve of him using them made her press her lips together very hard to contain something that was definitely not a smile. This is not appropriate, she said. Probably not, he agreed. I am trying to build something. I know. He looked up from the menu and met her eyes directly. I want to watch you do it. She held his gaze for a moment, those dark, still eyes that gave nothing away and somehow gave everything away at the same time. One lunch, she said. One lunch, he agreed. It was 3 hours. This was how it went for the next 2 months. Mamsoma throwing herself into the business with the focused fury of someone who had something to prove to herself above everyone else. Learning the hotels, the venues, the numbers, the staff, the suppliers, walking through properties her father had built and feeling the weight of everything he had believed about her settle into her. Bones like something long overdue. She was good at it, better than good. She had her father's eye for people and her own instinct for the room, and the combination was formidable in ways that surprised even her sometimes. And Ji-woo, relentlessly, continued to appear. Not suffocatingly, not desperately. He did not beg, did not perform. He simply refused to not exist in her orbit. He showed up when she needed a second opinion and offered one without being asked. He sat across from her at dinners that started as business and ended as something else, and never once made her feel like she had to be anything other than exactly what she was. He made her laugh. That was the thing she had not prepared for. Kang Ji-woo, worldwide mafia boss, billionaire, man whose name made governments nervous, was quietly and devastatingly funny in the kind of way that sneaks up on you when you are not defending yourself properly. She started answering his calls. She told Mimi it was purely practical. Of course it is, Mimi said. Do whatever helps you sleep at night. With a straight face and zero conviction, and Mamsoma chose not to examine that too closely. Elizabeth noticed. Of course Elizabeth noticed. Elizabeth had sharp eyes for everything concerning Mamsoma, had always had sharp eyes for it, though the reason had never been warmth. But something was shifting in the house. The Kang family had reached out formally again, an alliance strengthened by genuine connection rather than arrangement. Elizabeth had begun to look at her last-born daughter with an expression that sat somewhere between calculation and something softer that Elizabeth herself did not seem to know what to do with. She started suggesting the match, gently first, then less gently. He is serious about you, Elizabeth said one evening. Mamsoma did not look up from her laptop. I am aware. The Kang family. Mother. You could do far worse. Mother. Mamsoma closed the laptop and looked at Elizabeth, directly. You sent me to him because you wanted me out of your way. Please do not now act as though you are doing me a favor by continuing to push me toward him. Elizabeth was quiet. I am not a problem to be solved, Mamsoma said. Her voice was steady, had always been steadiest when she was most hurt. I was not a problem when I was born. I was not a problem when I was 7. I am not a problem now. I am your daughter. A pause. I just wish you had figured that out without needing to marry me off to do it. She picked up her laptop and went upstairs. Elizabeth stood in the sitting room alone and said nothing to no one. She said yes to Ji-woo 3 weeks later, not because of her mother, not because of the alliance or the family business, or any of the practical reasons that could be assembled in a list. She said yes because he had looked at her one evening over a dinner they were not supposed to be having, and said, I am not asking you to perform anything. I am asking you to stay. And she was so tired of being asked to be something else by everyone that the simplicity of just being asked to stay broke something open in her chest that she had not known was sealed. She said yes. She also, that same week, signed a contract. The Singapore deal had been in motion for 8 months before Ji-woo had entered the picture. A major expansion of the Yoon Hospitality Group into Southeast Asia. The groundbreaking ceremony, the launch meetings, the entire first phase of the project, it all required her physical presence in Singapore for an extended period beginning the day after her wedding. She had not told Ji-woo about it, not because she was hiding it, because she had signed it before he mattered, and now he mattered, and she did not know how to hold both things at the same time. So she held them separately and told herself she would figure out the rest later. Later arrived on their wedding night. The wedding had been beautiful, genuinely, unexpectedly, almost aggressively beautiful in the way that catches you off guard when you have spent the whole day managing your emotions with both hands. Mamsoma had stood at that altar in a dress that her father had cried when he saw and looked at Kang Ji-woo, and found him already looking at her with those dark eyes that gave nothing away, and somehow gave everything away at the same time. They had said their vows. They were married, and then at 11:45 in the evening, Mamsoma was standing in their suite with her suitcase already packed and her boarding pass already pulled up on her phone, and the expression of a woman who had made a decision and was not changing it. Ji-woo stood across the room and looked at the suitcase. Then he looked at her. "Tonight?" he said. "The contract was signed before us," she said. "The Singapore expansion cannot move without me being there for the opening meetings. I explained this." "You explained it 40 minutes ago." "Then you have had time to process it." He was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that was not empty, that was full of things being held very carefully. "Mamsoma." His voice was different, not the controlled boardroom voice, not the voice that gave orders in rooms full of men who did not breathe wrong in his presence. Something underneath that, something that did not come out often, and she could tell by the way he said her name that it cost him something to let it out now. "It is our wedding night." "I know," she said softly. He exhaled slowly. "I just need you to understand that this is not easy for me, standing here and watching you go, letting you go." A beat. "The last time I let someone in this far, it ended in a way I do not like to remember. And I told myself after that, never again, that I was done." His eyes held hers. "And then you sat across from me with your gum and your complete indifference to everything I am supposed to represent, and I could not look away. I have not been able to look away since." "I know," she said softly. "Delay it. Go tomorrow. Go next week. I will reschedule everything. I will have the jet ready whenever you say, just please not tonight." "Ji-woo, I will come with you, right now, tonight. I will sit in the back of every meeting and not say a single word." "No." She said it clearly, not unkindly but clearly. "I need to walk into those rooms as myself, not as your wife, not with you sitting in the back reminding every person in that room who I am married to. I need this to be mine." He looked at her for a long time. "So I am a distraction," he said. "You are the most powerful man in 6 countries," she said. "In any room you enter, you become the room. I cannot build something of my own standing in your shadow, even if the shadow is not intentional." She held his gaze. "Please understand that." He did not answer immediately, and that itself was unusual, because Kang Ji-woo always had an answer, always had the next word ready before the last one finished landing. It was one of the things about him that had unsettled her in the beginning, that complete readiness, that absolute composure. He was not composed right now. He turned away from her briefly, just for a moment. The way a person turns away when they need a second to decide how honest they are willing to be. Then he turned back, and when he looked at her, his eyes were different. Open in a way she had not seen before, unguarded in a way that she understood instinctively had nothing to do with weakness and everything to do with trust. "I stood at that altar today," he said quietly, "and I watched you walk toward me, and I thought—" He stopped, pressed his lips together, started again. "I have not let myself think about a future with anyone for a very long time. I decided after what happened before that I was done thinking that way, that nothing was worth it." His voice was low, steady but low. "And then today I stood there and watched you walk toward me, and I let myself think about it. About tonight, about what it means to start something with someone, about what it feels like to choose and be chosen." A pause. "I have been thinking about tonight all day, Mamsoma." She felt something shift in her chest. "Ji-woo, I know your reasons," he said. "I am not asking you to abandon your work. I am not asking you to choose. I just need you to understand what you are walking out of. This night does not come back. We do not get another first night. And He stopped again. Something moved across his face, quiet and unguarded and completely real. "I wanted it to mean something. I wanted us to have it." The room was very still. She looked at him, at this man who had the whole world afraid of him and was standing in front of her on his wedding night with no armor on, not performing vulnerability, not using it to change her mind, just telling her the truth because she had asked him always to tell her the truth, and he was honoring that even when it cost him. It cost her something to hold her ground. "It already means something," she said softly. Every bit of it already means something. He looked at her for a long moment, then something in him settled. Not happily, not easily, but with the quiet dignity of a man who had said what needed to be said and was now making peace with the answer. I understand it, he said, and she could see that he did, could see that he was holding it and turning it over and finding it reasonable even while it was costing him something considerable. I do not like it. I know. I want to come. I know. Misoma. Ji-woo. She crossed the room and stood in front of him, looked up at him. This man who had been a stranger 4 months ago and was now her husband, who had somehow, in the space between those two things, become the person she trusted most in the world without fully deciding to. I will call you every day. I will tell you everything. I just need to do this first part. Alone. He looked at her face for a moment, reading it the way he read everything, carefully, completely. Then he reached out and tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. Just that. Just one quiet gesture that said everything he was not going to say out loud. Every day, he said. Every day, she confirmed. He picked up her suitcase and carried it to the door himself because he was Kang Ji-woo, and even when he was losing an argument, he did it with complete dignity. She left. He stood in their suite on their wedding night and looked at the door for a while after it closed. He held himself for 6 days. This was, by any reasonable measure, an impressive achievement for a man who was not accustomed to holding himself at all. He ran his empire, attended meetings, handled 3 separate situations that required his particular brand of resolution, ate food he did not taste, slept in a bed that was too large and too quiet. She called every day as promised. They talked for sometimes an hour. She told him about the meetings, about Singapore, about the way the city moved differently from Seoul. He listened and asked questions and made her laugh twice on Tuesday and 3 times on Saturday and told himself this was enough. It was not enough. On the morning of the 7th day, he woke up at 4 in the morning and looked at the ceiling and had a very honest conversation with himself about the situation. He was Kang Ji-woo. He had built an empire from nothing, had walked into rooms that were designed to break him and walked out the other side intact, had faced things that would have destroyed other men and had not flinched once. He was also, apparently, completely unable to sit in Seoul while his wife was in Singapore running meetings without him and pretending they were not married. He called his pilot at 4:15. Singapore, he said. Yes, sir. What time? Now. Mamasoma walked into the conference room at 9 in the morning sharp, with her files under her arm and her mind already 3 agenda items ahead of where the meeting had not yet started. The room was full. Regional partners, investors, development heads, a full table of people who had flown in specifically for this meeting. She had prepared for 2 weeks for this moment, had gone over every number, every projection, every question they might ask, and every answer she intended to give. She set her files down at the head of the table. She was ready. What she was not ready for was the door opening 6 minutes into her opening remarks and the entire room standing up. Not politely, not the way people stand when someone enters who they have been told to respect, the way people stand when something walks into the room that their body recognizes before their brain does. Every single person at that table was on their feet with the kind of automatic deference that cannot be performed or practiced. It simply happens or it does not. Misoma stopped speaking. Mid-sentence. She did not need to turn around to know. She turned around anyway. Kang Ji-woo stood in the doorway in a dark suit with his hands in his pockets, looking for all the world like a man who had simply been passing by and thought he would look in. His eyes found her immediately across the room, and something in them that was usually so carefully controlled flickered for just a moment before the calm settled back over his face. The entire table was still standing. Mamasoma looked at her husband. Her husband looked at her. I said I would not come, he said. Not to the room. To her, like no one else was there. You said you would not come, she confirmed. I held myself for 6 days. 6 days, she repeated. It turns out, he said, with the particular composure of a man making a confession he has already made peace with, that 6 days is my limit. She pressed her lips together very hard. He turned to the room. Every person was still standing, still silent, still waiting. He looked at them with the quiet authority of someone who had never once needed to raise his voice to empty a room. Thank you, he said simply. We will need to reschedule. My wife and I have something to attend to. The room did not argue. The room did not ask questions. The room gathered its things with the focused efficiency of people who understood completely that this was not a negotiation, and filed out with a speed that was almost impressive. Within 4 minutes, the conference room was empty. It was just the two of them. Mem Soma looked at the empty room, at the chairs still slightly pushed back from where people had stood up, and quietly evacuated her entire morning schedule. She looked at Ji-woo. "You dismissed my meeting," she said. "I did," he agreed. "My meeting that I prepared 2 weeks for." "I know. That 12 people flew in for." "They can fly back," he said. "I will have them rescheduled by this afternoon. Better time slot. I will have food sent." A pause. Better food than whatever they had planned. Mem Soma stared at him. "Kang Ji-woo," she said. "Mama Soma. You cannot just—" She stopped, started again. "You cannot just fly to Singapore and dismiss my meetings because you missed me." "I did not dismiss it because I missed you," he said. "Then why?" He was quiet for a moment, those dark eyes steady on her face. "Because I have been sitting in Seoul for 6 days," he said, "in a house that has your things in it, and your smell in it, and no you in it. Because we got married and you left, and I told myself I understood, and I do understand, but understanding something and being able to live with it are two different things." He paused. "And because I walked in here and saw you standing at the head of that table, and you were so completely yourself that I could not sit in the back and say nothing. I did not want 12 other people in the room for what I need to say to you." The room was very quiet. Mema Soma set her files down. "What do you need to say to me?" she said. Not a question, an opening. He crossed the room until he was standing in front of her, close enough that she had to look up at him. He did not touch her, just stood there with that face that she had learned to read in the months between Valentine's Day and this moment. "Are you running?" he asked. "I am working," she said. "Mama Soma." She looked at him. "I am a little bit running," she admitted quietly. "From what?" She was silent for a moment, the kind of silence that means something is being assembled honestly. "From how much I do not want to lose this," she said finally. "From how much you matter, because every single thing that has mattered to me I have either lost or had taken or been made to feel I did not deserve." She looked at him steadily, even though it cost her. "It is easier to be the one who leaves than the one who gets left. I know how to be the one who leaves. I have been practicing my whole life." He was quiet, for a long moment. "I am not leaving," he said. "You do not know that." "I know that," he said. Completely, without qualification. "I know that the way I know everything that matters, and I need you to hear it." He reached out and took her hand. "I am not your mother. I am not anyone who looked at you and saw something they did not want. I looked at you across a dinner table when you blew a bubble in my face, and I saw exactly what I wanted, and I have not looked away since." A pause. "I am not leaving, Mam Soma. You are going to have to get used to that." She looked at their hands. "You flew here at 4 in the morning, she said. 4:15, he corrected, "because you missed me. Because you are my wife and 6 days was my limit." "Yes." She looked up at him. At this man who had come all this way not to take anything from her, but simply because he could not stay away. Who had dismissed a room full of people, not out of arrogance, but because he needed her to himself for 5 minutes to say the things that mattered. "You are so dramatic," she said. "I learned from you," he said. She laughed, actually laughed, full and real, and the sound of it in the empty conference room was the best thing either of them had heard in 6 days. He pulled her into him and she let him, and they stood there in the empty conference room in Singapore with her files on the table and 12 rescheduled meetings and a marriage that was figuring itself out, one honest conversation at a time. "I do not want you to disappear into the background of my life," she said into his shoulder. "I know," he said, "but I also cannot disappear into yours." "I know that too." His arms tightened slightly. "We will figure out the middle. The middle is complicated. Everything worth having is complicated," he said. "You of all people should know that." She was quiet for a moment. "Ji-woo." "Yes. I love you," she said. Simply, without performance, the way she did everything that was true. He was still for a moment. Just a moment. "I know," he said. She pulled back and looked at him. "That is all you have to say?" "I have loved you," he said quietly, since you told me your mother's disappointment was not your problem to carry. On a Valentine's Day date you did not want to be on. In a restaurant you were too unbothered to fully enjoy. The almost smile. I have just been waiting for you to catch up. She stared at him. You are the most infuriating man, she said. And yet, he said. And yet, she agreed. It was 8 weeks after the wedding when Mam Soma woke up in her Singapore hotel suite at 5 in the morning feeling like the room was spinning. She made it to the bathroom just in time. Afterward, she sat on the cool tile floor with her back against the wall and her knees pulled up and stared at nothing in particular while her mind did the math it had been avoiding for the past week. She had been tired, more tired than usual, the kind of tired that sleep did not fix. She had chalked it up to the Singapore schedule, the meetings, the time difference, the pressure of building something from the ground up in a city that was not home. But now, sitting on this bathroom floor at 5 in the morning after her body had just staged a very specific kind of revolt, the math was doing itself whether she wanted it to or not. She reached for her phone, opened the calendar, counted backwards, closed her eyes. Of course, she sat there for another 10 minutes doing absolutely nothing, just breathing, just existing in the space between not knowing for certain and knowing for certain. Then she stood up, washed her face, got dressed, and walked out of the hotel before the sun came up. Singapore at dawn was a different city, quieter, softer around the edges. She walked without direction, just moved, because sitting still felt impossible right now. She passed early morning joggers and street cleaners and a man setting up a fruit stand, who nodded at her like they were old friends. She found a 24-hour pharmacy 3 blocks from her hotel, walked in, stood in the aisle staring at the shelf for longer than was reasonable, picked up the test, paid for it without making eye contact, walked back to her hotel room and sat on the edge of the bed holding the box in both hands like it might explode. She thought about calling Jiwoo. She thought about calling Mimi. She thought about calling her father. She did not call anyone. She went into the bathroom, took the test, set it on the counter, and walked back out because she could not stand there and watch it develop. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the Singapore skyline turning gold with morning light and thought about absolutely nothing and absolutely everything at the same time. Her phone buzzed, a message from Jiwoo, just a photo, his coffee cup on his desk with the Seoul skyline behind it. No words, just that, their morning ritual. He sent her his view. She sent him hers. She looked at the photo for a long time, then she stood up and walked back into the bathroom. The test was sitting on the counter exactly where she left it. 2 lines, clear, unmistakable, absolute. She picked it up, looked at it, set it down, picked it up again. Then she sat down on the bathroom floor for the second time that morning and thought, with tremendous composure. Of course Kang Jiwoo does not do anything halfway. She sat there for a while. The sun came up fully. Light poured through the bathroom window and turned everything gold and warm and completely indifferent to the fact that Mam Soma Yoon's entire life had just shifted on its axis again. She picked up her phone, called Mimi. Mimi answered on the second ring because Mimi always answered. It is 5:30 in the morning, Mimi said, not accusingly, just noting it. I am pregnant, Mama Soma said. A pause, then quietly, Oh, Oma. Yes. How do you feel? Madame Soma looked at the ceiling of her hotel bathroom, at the test still sitting on the counter, at the morning light coming in. Terrified, she said, and she stopped. And? Mimi pressed gently. And like maybe this is the first thing that has ever been fully mine and fully chosen at the same time. She paused. Is that strange? No, Mimi said softly. That is not strange at all. They were quiet for a moment. Have you told him? Mimi asked. Not yet. When will you? Mama Soma looked at the test. Tonight, she said, when I can see his face. Jiwoo flew into Singapore that evening, not because she asked him to, because she had sent him a message at noon that said, Can you come to Singapore tonight? And he had replied, already on the plane before she could type anything else. She met him at her hotel suite. He walked in still in his travel clothes, set his bag down by the door, and looked at her with those dark eyes that missed absolutely nothing. What is wrong? He said. Not a question, a statement of fact. Something was wrong and he needed to know what it was so he could fix it. Nothing is wrong, she said. He looked at her. Mama Soma. Sit down, she said. He sat, on the edge of the couch, hands on his knees, watching her like she was about to deliver news that would require immediate action, and he was already preparing for it. She stood in front of him and realized she had not actually planned what to say, had spent the entire day thinking about this moment and had somehow not prepared a single word for it. So she reached into her pocket and pulled out the test and handed it to him. He looked at it. Then he looked at her. Then he looked at it again. His face did not change, not immediately, but something behind his eyes shifted. Something enormous and quiet and completely unguarded. "You are pregnant," he said. "Yes." He was very still. "How long have you known?" he asked. "Since this morning." He nodded slowly, still looking at the test in his hand like he was reading something written in a language he was still learning. "Are you all right?" he asked finally. Not congratulations, not this is wonderful, not any of the things people are supposed to say, just are you all right? Because he knew her, knew that this was enormous and terrifying and complicated, and that the first question that mattered was whether she was okay. "I do not know yet," she said honestly. "Ask me again tomorrow." He set the test down on the table very carefully. Then he stood up and crossed the small space between them and pulled her into him. Just that, just his arms around her and his chin on top of her head and the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "Are you all right?" she asked into his chest. "Yes," he said. "That was fast. I have had longer to think about it than you think." She pulled back and looked up at him. "What does that mean?" He looked at her for a moment. Then the corner of his mouth moved in that almost smile she had first seen across a Valentine's Day dinner table. "It means," he said, "that I have been thinking about what our children would look like since approximately the second week I knew you." She stared at him. "The second week? You were arguing with me about something, I do not even remember what, and you had this expression on your face, completely unbothered, completely certain. And I thought," he stopped. "I thought I want that. I want someone who looks at the world like that. I want to see what happens when that becomes a whole other person." Her throat felt tight. "You never said anything," she said. "You were not ready to hear it," he said simply. "And I was willing to wait." She looked at him, at this man who had been willing to wait for her to catch up to things he had already decided, who had let her leave on their wedding night because she needed to build something alone first, who had flown to Singapore at 4 a.m, because 6 days was his limit, who was standing here now holding the news of their child like something precious and fragile and already loved. "I am scared," she said quietly. "I know. I do not know how to do this." "Neither do I," he said. "We will figure it out." "What if I am terrible at it?" "You will not be. You do not know that." "Yes, I do," he said, completely without question. "You are good at everything that matters. This will not be different." She leaned her forehead against his chest and felt his arms tighten around her and thought about the fact that 8 weeks ago she had married this man, and tonight she was standing in a Singapore hotel suite telling him they were having a baby, and somehow both of those things felt equally impossible and equally true. "Ji-woo," she said. "Yes. Thank you for coming." "There is nowhere else I would be," he said. They stood there for a long time. The city moved outside the window. The sun set slowly and turned the sky orange and pink and gold. And inside that hotel suite, Kang Ji-woo and Mamasoma Yoon held each other and the news of the life they had made and let themselves begin to believe it was real. The first time Elizabeth called, Mamasoma was in a meeting. She saw her mother's name on the screen, felt something complicated move through her chest, and declined the call. The second time Elizabeth called, Mamasoma was on a site visit at one of the new properties. She saw the name, declined again. The third time she was having dinner with Ji-woo. She looked at the phone, looked at him. "Your mother?" he asked. "Yes." "Are you going to answer?" "No." He said nothing, just reached across the table and took her hand. The fourth time Elizabeth called, Mamasoma turned her phone off completely. It was Nara who finally got through. Mamasoma answered because Nara never called unless it was important, and the last time Nara had called with that particular tone in her voice, their father had been in the hospital. "Is Dad okay?" Mamasoma asked immediately. "Dad is fine," Nara said. "Oma, Mama has been trying to reach you." Mamasoma was quiet. "I know," Nara said gently. "I know you do not want to talk to her, but she has been calling me, and Soyeon." And she even called Jiwoo's office yesterday trying to find a way to reach you. She called Jiwoo's office? She is... Nara paused. She is not herself, Oma. She has been different since the wedding, since you left. I think she finally realized something. She has had 23 years to realize something, Ma'am Soma said. I know. Nara's voice was soft. I know she has, and I am not asking you to forgive her or forget or pretend any of it did not happen. I am just telling you that she is trying, and I think she means it this time. Ma'am Soma looked out the window of her Singapore office at the city she had been building her life in for the past 8 weeks. What does she want? She asked finally. To talk to you, Nara said. Just talk. She is not asking for anything else. She just... A pause. She said she wasted so much time grieving something she never lost and missed the daughter she actually had? The line was quiet for a moment. She said that? Mama Soma asked. She said that, Nara confirmed. Word for word. She was sitting at the kitchen table when she said it, and Oma, she was crying. I have never seen Mama cry. Mama Soma closed her eyes. I do not know what to do with that, she said quietly. You do not have to do anything with it right now, Nara said. I am just telling you, so you know, so when you are ready, if you are ever ready, you know that she is trying. They talked for a few more minutes, about nothing important. About Dad's health and Soyeon's youngest starting school and the weather in Seoul. Normal sister things, the kind of conversation that felt like breathing. When they hung up, Ma'am Soma sat at her desk for a long time doing nothing. Then she opened her phone, scrolled to her mother's contact, stared at it, did not call, but she did not delete the missed calls either. That evening she told Jiwoo about it. They were on the balcony. The city was doing its nighttime thing below them, all light and motion and beautiful indifference. She had her feet tucked under her and her hand resting on the small curve of her stomach that was just beginning to show. Nara called, she said. I know, he said. You have been quiet since. She looked at him. How do you always know? You do a thing with your face when you are thinking about your mother, he said. It is very specific. What thing? You look like you are solving an equation you do not want the answer to. She almost smiled. My mother has been calling, she said. I know that too, he said. She called my office. Nara told me. He was quiet for a moment, then gently, what did Nara say? Mama Soma told him. About Elizabeth crying, about the wasted time and the daughter she missed, about Nara saying their mother was different now. Jiwoo listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a while. What are you thinking? She asked. I am thinking, he said carefully, that you do not owe her anything. But, he looked at her. You are about to have a child, and whether you like it or not, that changes things. Not because it erases what she did, but because you are going to have to decide what kind of relationship you want your child to have with their grandmother, and that decision is easier to make now than it will be later. She looked at the city. I am not ready, she said. Then do not be ready, he said simply. But maybe do not close the door completely either. She leaned her head on his shoulder. She looked at him, at this man who somehow always knew exactly what she needed to hear. You are annoyingly right about most things, she said. Most things, he said. I am hurt. She almost smiled. They sat there, for a while longer. The city moved below them. Time passed the way it does, and somewhere in Seoul, Elizabeth Yoon sat by her phone and waited for a call that had not come yet, but might someday, if Grace found its way into all the spaces that had been empty for too long. 6 months later, Singapore was thriving. The Yoon hospitality expansion had exceeded every projection Ma'am Soma had put in front of those 12 rescheduled partners who had returned, better fed and slightly more impressed than before, to a meeting run by a woman who clearly knew exactly what she was doing. 3 new properties, 2 regional partnerships, a reputation that was building itself on her name alone. Ma'am Soma Yoon, not Kim Tae-yeon's daughter, not Kang Ji-woo's wife. Ma'am Soma Yoon. She was back in Seoul now. The foundation in Singapore was solid enough that she could run it remotely, and with 6 months of pregnancy showing clearly enough that flights were becoming complicated, it made sense to come home. To the house she shared with Ji-woo, to the business headquarters, to the life she had been building piece by piece. She sat in the Seoul office going through quarterly reports with the focused energy of someone who had found their rhythm, her hand resting absently on the curve of her stomach when Jiwoo came in and sat across from her desk and looked at her with an expression she could not immediately read. "She is here," he said. Mamasoma looked up. She did not need to ask who. "Where?" "Downstairs, in the lobby." He paused. "She has been sitting there for 2 hours. I did not tell her you were here. I wanted to tell you first." Mamsoma set down her pen slowly, looked at her desk, at the quarterly reports, at the business she had built and the life she had assembled, and the woman she had become in spite of everything. "She is not performing," Jiwoo said quietly. "I have seen her. She is just sitting there, waiting, hoping." He held her gaze. "She is begging, Oma. There is a difference, and you know the difference?" Mamsoma was quiet for a long moment. Her hand moved to rest on the curve of her stomach. "If I go down there," she said carefully, "it does not mean everything is erased." "Nothing is erased," he said. "It just means you are choosing what comes next instead of letting what already happened make the choice for you." She looked at him. "When did you get so wise?" she said. "I have always been wise," he said. "You were just too busy blowing bubbles to notice." She almost smiled. She stood up. Elizabeth was sitting in the lobby with her hands folded in her lap and her back straight in the way of a woman who had been raised never to let her posture show her feelings. But her face was different. The calculation was gone. The careful arrangement was gone. She looked up when she heard the elevator and saw her last-born daughter walking across the lobby toward her, visibly pregnant now, visibly thriving, and something in Elizabeth's face broke open completely and quietly, like something that had been waiting a very long time for permission. She stood up. "Mamsoma," she said. Her voice was different, stripped of everything that was not true. Mamasoma stopped in front of her mother, looked at the woman who had spent 23 years grieving a son who never came and missing the daughter who was right there the whole time, who had sent her to a Mafia boss on Valentine's Day and accidentally set in motion the best thing that had ever happened to her, who had stood in a sitting room and said, "Is it not you again," like a verdict, and who was now standing in a hotel lobby with none of her armor on. "Mama," Mamsoma said. Elizabeth's eyes filled. She did not let the tears fall because she was still Elizabeth, but they were there. "I am sorry," Elizabeth said. "I am so deeply sorry. I looked at you and saw everything I wanted and could not recognize it because it did not come in the shape I expected." Her voice was steady but only barely. "You are the best of everything your father and I had. You always were. I was just too foolish and too proud and too lost in my own grief to see what was standing right in front of me." Mamsoma was quiet. "I do not want to go backwards," she said finally. "I am not asking you to," Elizabeth said. "I am asking you to let me be your mother going forward, properly, the way I should have been from the beginning." A pause. "I am asking you to let me meet my grandchild and be worthy of them." Mamsoma looked at her mother for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and hugged her. It was not a long hug. It was not a movie hug full of weeping and music. It was brief and careful and real. The hug of two people beginning something new, rather than pretending the old thing had not existed. Elizabeth held her daughter like someone holding something they had almost lost, and finally understood the weight of. Later that evening, Mamsoma sat on the couch with her feet tucked under her and her hand resting on the small but undeniable curve of her stomach, and Jiwoo beside her, reading something on his phone with the particular domestic calm of a man who had made his peace with his life. "She held me like she was afraid I would disappear," Mamsoma said. "You almost did," Jiwoo said without looking up. "Several times. I was not going to disappear. You tiptoed out of my house at 6:47 in the morning. That was different. You flew to Singapore on your wedding night. That was also different. You are currently growing a whole person inside you and have told approximately 4 people." Mamsoma looked at him. He looked up from his phone and met her eyes, and the almost smile was there, warm and certain and completely his. "I am not going anywhere," she said. "I know," he said. "I have always known." She leaned her head on his shoulder. Outside, Seoul was doing its evening thing, all light and motion and the quiet hum of a city that did not stop for anyone. Inside, Mamsoma Yoon, last born, former family villain, accidental wife, daughter in progress, mother-to-be, sat with the life she had built around her and felt, for the first time in as long as she could remember, exactly the right size. Not too much, not enough, just right, gum and all. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone watching this. Whether you are celebrating with someone special or celebrating yourself today, I hope this story reminds you that love worth having is love that lets you stay exactly who you are. Gum and all. If Mem Soma made you laugh, made you feel seen, or made you believe in the kind of love that chases you across continents, then hit that subscribe button right now. Share this with someone who needs to hear a story about a woman who refused to shrink herself for anyone. And drop a comment below telling me your favorite moment. Was it the gum, the tiptoe, the 6 days? I read every single one and I want to know. Thank you for spending your Valentine's Day here with me. I will see you in the next story.